Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. The tie-up between Qatar Airways and Virgin Australia was supposed to increase competition and reduce airfares for travellers, particularly those heading to Europe. But as we enter the northern summer and demand increases for flights to Europe, that hasn't exactly happened yet. On the other hand, flights to the US are suddenly a lot more affordable. I wanted to get a picture of the state of the aviation industry and what it all means for passengers. Jeffrey Thomas is one of the best-known aviation commentators in the country. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of 42,000 Feet. I'm going to give you the website because it is well worth a visit, 42kft.com. 42,000 feet, 42kft.com. It's a new venture. Among other things, he's introduced the world's first holistic environmental ranking for airlines. We'll get to that a little later. But firstly, Jeffrey, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
We're heading into the northern summer. What's it mean for airfares right now?
Well, look, airfares are still kind of crazy. There's still capacity problems. You've got airlines like Qantas still to bring aeroplanes back into their fleet. Qatar, of course, is expanding at a great rate. So is Emirates and a few others. But there's no stability yet in the airfares. We haven't seen them return internationally back to 2019 levels. Hopefully, by the end of the year, things will stabilise and the normal patterns will resume. But for the moment, it's still a bit chaotic.
Does that mean there are good deals if you happen to be able to find them, or does it mean that there aren't any good deals?
No, look, there are good deals, and I recommend to my friends and colleagues, go see a travel agent because there are all sorts of deals out there, aside from the seat sales that we're seeing more of all of a sudden. Qantas has had a couple recently, so have Virgin, they're domestic and or international. So yes, there are brief seat sales that are out there. I haven't seen any from people like the Middle Eastern carriers or Singapore Airlines, for instance, but there's been a few from Qantas and Virgin. So yeah, there is activity in that space starting to happen.
Has the Virgin Qatar tie-up made much of a difference in terms of fares for Australians yet?
Look, it's a little bit hard to say at this stage because one of the things that's happening, for instance, out of Perth where I live, the introduction of the 777, which Virgin's going to use, Qatar 777, that has also corresponded with Qatar removing their A380 from the route and replacing it also with a 777. So while there's a double daily now, whether it's under the Virgin banner or the Qatar banner, it's Qatar Metal, the A380 has been taken away. And so you've got a seat reduction in that space, although overall there's an increase in capacity, but not as great as you'd think.
Just as an aside, I mean, anyone that's ever been on an A380 is in awe of that particular plane. The 777s, the Dreamliners, a lot more efficient. I kind of get all that. But it's just interesting that the economics of a Dreamliner is such that you can put 2 Dreamliners per A380 and it makes it worth it.
Oh, look, absolutely. Well, the basis of that is that the Dreamliner uses approximately 34% less fuel per passenger in a Qantas configuration. And I might mention the Qantas configuration for the 787-9 is only about 236 seats, whereas an Air New Zealand one, for instance, has 265 seats. So the Dreamliner that Qantas uses is configured for these ultra-long range flights, non-stops to Paris and Rome and London. Therefore, they've got a lower seat count. So, but even that, 34% less fuel per passenger than a Qantas A380. So there's a very compelling reason to go to these super efficient twin-engine aircraft.
You mentioned Qantas. How is Qantas travelling at the moment? It's had a tumultuous 2 or 3 years, but things seem to have settled down.
Look, it has, and as you would know, Sean, as you would well know, a lot of that was the tabloid media ripping into it, and I don't think they understood the dynamics coming out of COVID, where there was a huge shortage of parts, delays in delivery of aircraft. There was all sorts of problems getting staff back, in not just in the airline, but air traffic control, baggage handlers, all the supplementary support for the aviation industry. And it wasn't just a Qantas problem, it was a global problem. And that's something that really wasn't understood. But having said that, yes, they had plenty of problems, no question about it. And they really got attacked. But those problems are abating. They're still not over. Their last A380 comes back in January next year. Their A350-1000s, that's that new super Project Sunrise airplane that's going to go from Sydney to London non-stop, Sydney to New York non-stop. That's now running 7 to 8 months late and won't be delivered until late 2026. So that service is going to be delayed somewhat. So there are still problems for them, but they are getting better, albeit slowly.
Jeffrey, stay with me. We'll be back in a minute. I'm talking to Jeffrey Thomas from 42,000 Feet. Environmental rankings. This is your bread and butter nowadays. Which airlines top the list? Well, firstly, how do you work it out? How do you create a list? And which airlines top the list?
Well, that's a good question. How do we rank it? Now, there are other people who do this, but what they do is they look at the current fuel consumption and they look at how much sustainable aviation fuel is used by the airline. But for us, that's not really a measure. Our measure is what the airline is doing in the long term, not just aspirational comments like, yes, we're headed for net zero by 2050. That's a given. That's the aspiration for all the airlines. What are you actually doing about it? So we look at the airline's fleet age at the moment. We look at the fleet renewal program in particular, like Qantas, for instance. It's got about 200 aircraft on order. United Airlines is the biggest airline in the world, approximately the biggest airline in the world, with about 1,000 aircraft. They've got 700 on order. 700.
Wow.
And what they've just done is they've just ordered 200. They've given Jet Zero in Long Beach, California, a conditional order for 200 of their flying wing concept, about a 250 passenger aircraft that will burn 50% less fuel than the aircraft it will replace. That's an enormous investment, and it's enabling people like Jet Zero to raise capital to get the aircraft built. Now, so we're looking at things like that, their long-term firm commitments, and other airlines like mention Qantas again, if I can, they're making big investments in sustainable aviation fuel companies, and there are others that are looking at and ordering hybrid electric aircraft, not these little 4-passenger things. We don't count those. This is a 20, 30 passenger hybrid electric turboprop aircraft from Heart Aerospace in Sweden. So we're looking at things like that to get to our rankings. You ask which are the best airlines. Well, Qantas scores a 10 out of 10, Air New Zealand a 10 out of 10, United, AirAsia, again, a 10 out of 10. So there's quite a few that do score the top mark of 10 because they are firmly committed to a rejuvenation of their fleet, investment in sustainable aviation fuel, and investment in brand new technology aircraft.
Without getting too nerdy on this, aviation fuel or green aviation fuel, how far away is it?
Well, we're already using it. And the issue is the feedstock. And that's the big environmental issue, to get enough feedstock, to get refineries to produce it. And the other problem with sustainable aviation fuel is it's more expensive than jet fuel. And that's one of the problems, for instance, with something like hydrogen. People talk about hydrogen as a magic bullet. Now, Airbus has just put back by 10 years their hydrogen concept aircraft from 2035 to 2045 because of the technology problems. But the other problem with hydrogen is that it's 4 times the cost of jet fuel, and it takes up 4 times the volume of jet fuel. So there are a lot of challenges when it comes to things like alternative fuels like hydrogen. But back to SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, the big issue is developing it with the feedstocks required and getting those feedstocks certified. For instance, AirAsia at the moment is trying to get palm oil certified as a sustainable aviation fuel. And there's quite a few challenges around getting that done. So there are a variety of problems with SAF.
So are there the carriers that in a sense are doing most at the moment, are they doing it more on the side of just more efficient uses of jet fuel, so aircraft that use it more efficiently rather than SAF, or is it a bit of both?
Look, it's about the environmental focus of the airline, and they all the airlines recognise that they have got to do something to reduce the amount of fuel. I mean, one of the things we should mention here, since 1960, the aviation industry has reduced the amount of fuel used on an aeroplane per passenger by about 82%.
Wow.
It's an amazing technology, all built around the jet engine, basically, the efficiency of the jet engine and the size of the jet engine and other dynamics. But air travel is doubling every 10 to 15 years. So they know that even though we're reducing and have reduced fuel burn, we've got to do something to combat the amount of fuel that is used. So airlines are saying we've got to invest in SAF. That is something that cuts the actual CO2 by 80%. So it's a big focus for environmentally conscious airlines.
Fascinating. Jeffrey, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Pleasure.
That was Jeffrey Thomas, founder and editor-in-chief of 42,000 Feet. If you want to check it out, 42kft.com, 42kft.com. This is the Fear and Greed Business Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.